Pretty interesting everything you were saying about the stereo conversion. I live in London. I've been living in London for the last 8 years, but I'm originally from Mexico. I saw someone from Mexico there in the messages. And I moved to the US in 2010, and it was really hard to find a job in film. I had studied film and animation. The first job I had was at a stereo conversion studio in 2012. Um, so I have recorded my presentation, so don't be scared if you see that my mouth is not moving, but the sound is coming through it. So I'm gonna start sharing my presentation now. All right. So there we go. Enjoy. Oh, hello, my name is Nicolas Casanova. I'm a stereo supervisor for visual effects and animation studios. I am going to tell you about the stereo process in filmmaking. Here are some of the films I have worked on, and I have recently started posting my personal work on Instagram and DOVR. You can find the stereo photos from this presentation on my Instagram account, Dr. Stereo 3D. I decided to name the presentation The Good, the Bad, and the Vertical Misalignment because a lot of work done in post-production for native stereo films has to do with removing the vertical misalignment and color differences between views. These are caused when cameras are not properly aligned or the parameters between lenses are different. For example, the focus, aperture, or focal length can be different, and it is often the case that the light can hit each lens in a stronger direction than the other. There are three main ways in which stereo films are done, and all of them require different levels of post-production. The oldest one is to capture the image with two cameras. This has always been complicated given the large size of camera lenses. In these two rigs, one of the cameras is pointing straight through a one-side mirror, while the other camera is recording the reflected image on the mirror. This camera can be moved millimeters or inches depending on how much volume the cinematographer desires. More recently, Blackmagic has started manufacturing this camera. It has a fixed offset between the lenses and it is meant to match the volume that you perceive within the Apple Vision Pro. As technology keeps advancing, we can expect smaller camera rigs, but because of the size and discrepancy between images, most filmmakers prefer to shoot with one camera and have their films converted in post-production. The disadvantage of stereo conversion is that it's usually based on depth maps to create volume. The larger the volume, the more stretching artifacts are introduced. The depth map creation and cleanup processes on an entire film can take up to 1,000 artists or more. Here you can see on the converted image how there's a lot of stretch from character to background, but there can also be a lot of artifacting within the character if there's too much volume in a close-up shot, for example. The image on the right is the native stereo image and the left was converted. And you can see how the arm of the knight is too disproportionate compared to the volume within the knight armor and the horse. Also, you can see that the saddle of the horse is dropping back in depth and not staying within the horse. You can also see that the reflectivity on the armor is lost. This can sometimes be desirable by the filmmakers if the difference in reflectivity is too much between both views, but I usually try to keep clues like this that it is a native image. The least complicated and also the cleanest way of making a stereo film is with fully generated animation. When working with CG, computer generated, there is a camera element within the software. This camera has real world properties like a real film camera does. In this example, you can see the software interface. This is Unreal Engine, where I'm moving the secondary camera to give volume to the two characters. The majority of the films I have worked on have been a combination between stereo conversion and full CG because of the amount of real elements that are filmed with one camera only. For example, in the Little Mermaid live action remake, the actors were filmed with one camera and a conversion studio gave them volume while we created the hair, environment, and animals digitally. For example, here, you can see this is a real actress, but here all the hair, the environment, the animals, everything is digitally created and filmed with two virtual cameras. The most recent film I supervised was Mufasa, the Lion King. It is a full CG animated film where every shot was done digitally. The film had around 1700 shots and it took us almost 4 years to complete. The process of creating a final shot takes a lot of steps and the work of a lot of artists from different disciplines. Layout is the discipline in charge of setting up the camera position and movement along with the characters in the shot. Here we see the camera blocking being done in a physical set with the actors, and the recorded camera movement will be used by all the artists as they work towards the final image. It is at this early stage that I first start working with the camera. I create the secondary camera in the software and review the stereo image to give volume to the virtual characters and environment as it's in progress. Parallel to the layout stage, the characters and environment are being perfected. Once the animation is finished, the final image is rendered at high quality with photorealistic elements. I have oversimplified the process, but there are hundreds of artists with different skills working on creating the final image, and in between my first stereo work at layout stage and the final stereo image, some artifacts are introduced. These are fixed during compositing, which is the last stage of the film, where we use a software called Nuke by the Foundry. It's the best image editor, like a Photoshop for moving images. You can see on this side, on the left side of the images, it's the polygon versions, work in progress versions, and then on the right sides are the final images where you can see final environment, final groom or fur on the animals. This effect simulation of the snow that the characters can interact with, like they affect it and they move it as they walk and as they kind of like swim through the snow. This is the character study of one of the characters in the film called Taka. It's one of the main lions, and in some shots the camera could get this close to characters. If you can appreciate the depth separation between, for example, the eyelash to the rest of the fur, you can tell how it would have been really difficult to do stereo conversion in something like this. It would have required too much cleanup. Instead, filming with two cameras, with two virtual cameras, makes things a lot easier. It's easier to achieve quality that way. If you cannot see the images here in the presentation, you can check out the post that I did on Instagram today on March 9th, 2025. And for example, you can appreciate how in this image, the reflection and refractions within the eyeball, the separation between the eyelashes, as well here. Like you can even see volume within the hairs on his chin. You can see inside of the mouth. You can see separation with the whiskers in this image. I've been doing stereo work for 13 years, and the amount of work that goes into correcting this has put me off from publishing my own until a few months ago that I decided to try and find the easiest way to create and publish stereo images. At first, I started taking sequential stereo photos with my phone wherever I saw something interesting, and I would try to edit them within my phone using apps like Crosscam and 3D Stereo Pro, and I would review them with an OWL viewer. More recently, I have started to edit the images in my personal computer using Nuke, the same software I use for film, since it's the one I'm the most familiar with. I try not to spend too much time in front of the computer after work, so I publish some of these photos without any corrections at all. I have found that most of my sequential images are on the hyper stereo side. I tend to offset my camera by too much and not notice until I review the photos with the OWL viewer or in my stereo monitor. For this reason, I have started taking photos in burst modes. Burst mode is a mode that a lot of cameras have where the camera takes a lot of images one after the other as I move the camera left to right, and having all these images gives me the flexibility to select the best pair of photos rather than being limited only to the two photos that I took left or right. That's all from me. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that the presentation was not too technical and boring, and that you enjoy my work. Thank you.